So Flying Fiddler, I'm here in Athens in the ancient marketplace, the ancient agora, and I'm right here in the spot. And probably some of these ruins that I'm sitting on were part of the ancient law courts. So this spot right here is literally where the apology takes place. And what is the apology? It's a play. It's a play with the character Socrates that Plato has written that most people think is generally historically an event, something that probably actually historically happened, but it actually doesn't really matter whether it's historical or not. It's the ideas that are important, and it's the symbols and the knowledge that's important. So whether or not it's historically accurate, I tend to think that there was probably a real Socrates, and there was probably some truth to what was said in this dialogue in the apology, but we don't know how much Plato actually put in the mouth of Socrates in this book, and how much was actually like literal, like if you were there with a tape recorder, what Socrates would have said right here in the Athenian law court in 399 BC. So cool. So without further ado, here's the apology. So scene 1, in the court, Socrates speaks. How you, O Athenians, have been affected by my accusers, I cannot tell. But I know that they almost made me forget who I was. So persuasively did they speak. And yet they have hardly uttered a word of truth. But of many falsehoods told by them, there was one which quite amazed me. I mean, when they said that you should be upon your guard not to allow yourself to be deceived by the force of my eloquence. To say this, when they were certain to be detected as soon as I opened my lips and proved myself to be anything but a great speaker, did indeed appear to be the most shameless thing that they said, unless by the force of eloquence they mean the force of truth. For, if that is their meaning, I admit then that I am eloquent. But in how different a way from theirs? Well, as I was saying, they have scarcely spoken the truth at all. But from me you shall hear the whole truth, not however delivered after their manner in a set oration, ornamented with words and phrases. No, by heaven, but I shall use the words and arguments which occur to me at the moment, for I am confident in the justice of my cause. Trust what I say is right. At my time of life, I ought not to be appearing before you, O citizens of Athens, in a character of a juvenile orator. Let no one expect that of me. I must beg of you to grant me a favor. If I defend myself in my accustomed manner, and you hear me using the words which I have been in the habit of using in the agora, at the tables of the money changers, or anywhere else, I would ask you not to be surprised, and not to interrupt me on this account. For I am more than 70 years of age, and appearing now for the first time in a court of law. I am quite a stranger to the language of this place, and therefore I would have you regard me as if I really were a stranger, whom you would excuse if he spoke in a native tongue, and after the fashion of his country. Am I making an unfair request of you? Never mind the manner, in which may or may not be good, but think only of the truth of my words, and give heed to that. Let the speaker speak truly, and let the judge decide justly. And first, I have to replay the older charges to my first accusers, and then I will go on to the later ones. For of old I have had many accusers, who have accused me falsely to you during many years. And I am more afraid of them than of Anytus and his associates, who are dangerous too in their own way, but far more dangerous are the others, who began when you were children, and took possession of your minds with their falsehoods, telling of one Socrates, a wiser man, who speculated about the heaven above, and searched into the earth beneath, and who made the worse argument appear the better argument. The disseminators of this tale are the accusers whom I dread, for their hearers are apt to fancy that such inquirers do not believe in the existence of the gods. And there are many, and their charges against me are of ancient date. And they were made by them in the days when you were more impressionable than you are now, in childhood, or it may be in youth. And the cause when you heard went by default, for there was no one to answer or to rebut these claims. And hardest of all, I do not know and cannot tell the names of my accusers, unless in the chance case of a comic poet, Aristophanes. All who from envy and malice have persuaded you, some of them having first convinced themselves all this class of citizens are most difficult to deal with, for I cannot have them up here and cross-examine them, and therefore I must simply fight with shadows in my own defense and argue when there is no one who answers. I will ask you to assume with me, as I was saying, that my opponents are of two kinds, one recent and the other ancient, and I hope that you will see the propriety of my answering the latter first, for these accusations you heard long before the others, and much, much more often. Well then, I must make my defense, and endeavor to clear away in a short time a slander which has lasted a long time. May I succeed, if to succeed be for my own good and yours, or likely to avail me in my cause. Remember, he was on trial for his life. The task is not an easy one. I quite understand the nature of it, and so leaving the event with God, in obedience to the law, I will now make my defense. That kind of reminds me of the Bhagavad Gita. So leave up the results to God, and then you do your best. It's karma yoga. I will begin at the beginning and ask, what is the accusation which has given rise to the slander of me, and in fact has encouraged Miletus to proffer this charge against me? Well, what do the slanderers say? They shall be my prosecutors, and I will sum up their words in an affidavit. Socrates is an evildoer and a curious person who searches into things in earth and in heaven, and he makes the worse argument appear the better cause, and he teaches the aforesaid doctrines to others. Such is the nature of the accusation. It is just what you have yourselves seen in the comedy of Aristophanes, who has introduced a man who he calls Socrates as a character, going about and saying that he walks in the air and talking a deal of nonsense concerning matters of which I do not pretend to know either much or little about. Not that I mean to speak disparagingly of anyone who is a student of natural philosophy. I should be very sorry if Miletus could bring so grave a charge against me. But the simple truth is, O Athenians, I have nothing to do with physical speculations. Very many of those here present are witnesses to the truth of this, and to them I appeal. Speak then. If you have ever heard me, tell your neighbors now, whether any of you have ever known me to hold forth in few words or in many upon such physical speculation matters of natural philosophy. You hear their answers, nothing. And from what they say of this part of the charge, you will be the judge of the truth of the rest of what they charge me of. So this isn't true, neither is the other stuff that they're saying. So, as a little foundation here, there is for the report that I am a teacher, and I take money. This accusation has no more truth in it than the other. Although, if a man were really able to instruct mankind to receive money for giving instruction, it would, in my opinion, be an honor to be this kind of a teacher. There is, and he names a couple of different famous sophists, famous teachers from different places. They go around to the cities and are able to persuade the young men, the young citizens, to leave their own citizens by whom they might be taught for free and come with them, whom they not only pay, but are thankful that they may be allowed to pay to learn from these people, from these teachers. There is at the time a Parian philosopher residing in Athens of whom I have heard, and I came to hear him in this way. I came across a man who has spent a ton of money on the sophist, Callias, the son of Hippoconius, And I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Hipponicus. I'll probably skip over a lot of the words because I'll probably stumble over a lot of the the names of the folks. Knowing that he had sons, I asked him, Callias, I said, if your 2 sons were foals or calves, then there would be no difficulty in finding someone to teach them. We should hire a trainer of horses, or a farmer probably, who would improve and perfect them in their own proper virtue and excellence. But they are human beings. Who are you thinking of placing over them to teach them? Is there anyone who understands human and political virtue? You must have thought about the matter, for you have sons. Is there anyone? There is, he said. Who is he? Said I. And of what country? And what does he charge? Evenus, the Parian, he replied. He is the teacher, and his charge is 5 minae. Happy is Evenus, I said to myself, if he really has this wisdom and teaches at such a moderate charge. Had I the same wisdom, I should have been very proud and conceited. But the truth is that I have no knowledge of this kind. I dare say, Athenians, that some one among you will reply, yes, Socrates. But what is the origin of these accusations which are brought against you? There must have been something strange that you were doing. All these rumors and all this talk about you would never have arisen if you had been like all the other people. Tell us, what is the cause of them? For we should be sorry to judge you hastily. We want to know. Now I regard this as a fair challenge, and I will endeavor to explain to you the reason why I am called wise and have such an evil fame. Please pay attention to what I say. And although some of you think that I am joking, I declare that I will tell you the entire truth. Citizens of Athens, this reputation of mine has come of a certain sort of wisdom which I do possess. If you ask me what kind of wisdom, I reply, wisdom such as may perhaps be attained by humans. For to that extent, I am inclined to believe that I am wise. Whereas the persons of whom I am speaking have superhuman wisdom, all the sophist teachers, which I may fail to describe because I don't have it myself. I don't know what it is. And he who says that I have this kind of wisdom speaks falsely and is taking away my character. And here, O citizens of Athens, I must beg you, don't interrupt me. Do not interrupt me, please, even if I seem to say something extravagant. For the word which I will speak is not mine. I will refer you to a witness who is worthy of credit, and that witness shall be the god of Delphi, Apollo. He will tell you about my wisdom. There was a oracle at Delphi. Some of you probably know that. He will tell you about my wisdom, if I have any, and of what sort it is. You must have known Chaerephon. He was an early friend of mine, and also a friend of yours, for he shared in the recent exile of the people, and returned with you. Well, Chaerephon, as you know, was very impetuous in all his doings, and he went to Delphi and boldly asked the oracle to tell him whether, as I was saying, I must beg you, do not interrupt. He asked the oracle to tell him whether anyone was wiser than I was. And the prophetess answered that there was no person wiser than Socrates. Chaerephon is dead himself now, but his brother, who is in this court right now, will confirm the truth of what I am saying. Why do I mention this? Because I am going to explain to you why I have such an evil name. When I heard this answer from the oracle, I said to myself, what can the god mean? And what is the interpretation of this riddle? For I know that I have no wisdom, small or great. What then can the god mean when he says that I am the wisest of men? And yet he is a god, and the gods cannot lie. That would be against their nature. After long consideration, I thought of a method of trying the question. I reflected that if I could only find a person wiser than me, then I might go to the god with a refutation. And I should say, here is a person who is wiser than I am? But you said that I was the wisest. Accordingly, I went to one in the marketplace who had a reputation of wisdom, and observed him. His name I need not mention. He was a politician, whom I selected for examination, and the result went as follows. When I began to talk with him, I could not help thinking that he was not really wise, although he was thought to be wise by many, and still wiser by himself. And thereupon I tried to explain to him that he thought that he was wise, but he was not really wise. He really didn't know what he was talking about. He couldn't answer my questions. And the consequence was that he hated me, and his anger at me was shared by the several who were present and heard me talking. So I left him, saying to myself as I went away, well, although I do not suppose that either of us knows anything really beautiful and good, I am better off than he is, for he knows nothing and thinks that he knows. I neither know nor think that I know. In this latter particular, then, I seem to have slightly the advantage of him. Then I went to another who still had higher pretensions to wisdom, and my conclusion was exactly the same, whereupon I made another enemy of that person, and many, many others by repeating this process. Then I went to one person after another, not being unconscious of the anger which I provoked. And I lamented and feared this, but necessity was laid upon me. The word of God, I thought, ought to be considered first. And I said to myself, go, I must to all who appear to know in our society, and I must find out the meaning of the oracle, the God. And I swear to you, Athenians, by the dog I swear, for I must tell you the truth. The result of my mission was just this. I found that the men most in repute for wisdom were all but the most foolish when I questioned them, and that others less esteemed were really wiser and better. I will tell you the tale of my wanderings and of the Herculean labors, as I may call them, which I endured, only to find at last that the oracle was irrefutable. So after the politicians, I went to the poets. So modern sense, poets, not just people who write poetry, but people who write music. Think of Taylor Swift. Think of all your favorite rock stars. Think of the people who are writers for sitcoms on TV and streaming services. Think about people who write movies, plays on Broadway. These are the poets that he's talking about. So I went to the poets and I said to myself, you will be instantly detected, and now you will find out that you are more ignorant than they are. Accordingly, I took them some of the most elaborate passages from their own works, from their own writings, and I asked them questions as to what the meaning of this writing was, thinking that they would teach me something wise. Will you believe me? I am almost ashamed to confess the truth, but I must say that there is hardly a person present who would not have talked better about their writing and their works than they did themselves. Then I knew that not by wisdom do poets write poetry, but by a sort of genius and inspiration. They're like diviners or soothsayers, who also say many fine things, but do not understand the meaning of them. The poets appeared to me to be much in the same case, and I further observed that upon the strength of their poetry, they believed themselves to be the wisest of citizens in other things which they were not wise. So I left, conceiving myself to be superior to them for the same reason that I was superior to the politicians. At last I went to the artisans, for I was conscious that I knew nothing at all, as I may say, and I was sure that they knew many fine things. So these are like craftsmen, like people who make things and build things and do the important work in a society. I was sure that they would know many fine things, and here I was not mistaken, for they did know many things, of which I was ignorant, and in this they certainly were wiser than I was. But I observed that even the good artisans fell into the same error as the poets. Because they were good workmen, they thought that they also knew all sorts of high matters, and this defect in them overshadowed their wisdom. And therefore I asked myself on behalf of the oracle whether I should like to be as I was, neither having their knowledge nor their ignorance, or like them in both. And I made an answer to myself that to the oracle that I was better off as I was. This inquisition has led me to having many enemies of the worst and the most dangerous kind, and it has given occasion to the many errors and calumnies, and I am called wise, for my hearers always imagine that I possess the wisdom which I find lacking in others. But the truth is, O citizens of Athens, that God only is wise, being, existence, the universe, and by his answer, he intends to show that the wisdom of humans is worth little or nothing. He is not speaking of Socrates, he is only using my name by way of illustration, as if he said, he, O citizens, is the wisest who, like Socrates, knows that his wisdom is in truth worth nothing. And so I go about the world obedient to the God, and search and make inquiry into the wisdom of anyone, whether citizen or stranger, who appears to be wise. And if he is not wise, then in vindication of the oracle, I show him that he is not wise. And my occupation quite absorbs me, and I have no time to give either to any public matter of interest or concern of my own. But I am in utter poverty by reason of my devotion to the God and my Socratic quest. I added that last part. There is another thing, young men of the richer classes who have not much to do. They come about of their own accord, and they like to hear the people I examine. And they go around and they often imitate me and proceed to examine others by questioning them. There are plenty of persons, as they quickly discover, who think that they know something, but really know little or nothing when you ask enough questions about a certain subject. Those who are examined by them, instead of being angry with those kids that are going around doing that, they are angry with me, and they say that I taught them to do that. And they say, this confounded Socrates, they say, this villainous misleader of the youth. And then if somebody asks them, why? What the devil? What evil does he practice or teach? They don't know. They can't tell. But in order that they may not appear to be at a loss for words, they repeat the old ready-made stock charges which are used against all natural philosophers about teaching things up in the air and the clouds and the moon and under the earth and having no gods and making the worse argument appear the better, because they don't like to confess that their pretense of knowledge has been detected, which is the truth. They really don't know what they're talking about, so they make up some stuff about me. As they are numerous and ambitious and energetic and are drawn up in a battle array and have persuasive tongues, they have filled your ears with their loud and invariate calumnies, cries. And this is the reason why my three accusers, Miletus, Antius, and Lycon, have set upon me. Miletus, who has a quarrel with me on behalf of the poets, Anytus on behalf of the craftsmen and politicians, Lycon on behalf of the rhetoricians, the spin advertising agents. And as I said at the beginning, I cannot expect to be rid of such a mass of anger all in a moment. And this, O citizens of Athens, is the truth. It's the whole truth. I have concealed nothing. I have dissembled. I have hidden nothing. And yet I know that my plainness of speech makes them hate me. And what is their hatred but a proof that I am speaking the truth? So I'm speaking the truth, I'm hitting them where it hurts, and they're getting mad at me. Hence has arisen the prejudice against me, and this is the reason for it. You will find out either in this or any future inquiry. So I've said enough about my defense in the first class of my accusers. Now I turn to the second class. They are headed by Miletus, that good man, and true lover of his country, as he calls himself. Against these two I must make a defense. So let their affidavit be read. It contains something of this kind. It says that Socrates is a doer of evil who corrupts the young and who does not believe in the gods of the state, but has new other divinities of his own. Such is the charge, and I will now examine the particular counts. He says that I am a doer of evil and corrupter of the youth. But I say, O citizens of Athens, that Miletus is the doer of evil, in that he pretends to be in earnest when he is only just in jest. And he is so eager to bring men to trial from a pretend zeal and interest in matters in which he really never had the smallest interest. And the truth is, of this I will endeavor to prove now. Come here, Miletus. I want to ask you a question. You think a great deal about an improvement of the youth? Yes, I do. Tell the judges then, who is their improver? For you must know, as you have taken the pains to discover their corrupter, and are citing and accusing me before them. Speak then, and tell the judges, who is their improver? Observe, Miletus, that you are silent. You have nothing to say. But is this not rather disgraceful? You have a very considerable proof of what I was just saying, that you have no interest in this matter. Speak up, friend, and tell us, who is their improver? After a long silence, I imagine, Miletus says, the laws. But that, my good sir, is not my meaning. I want to know who the person is. Who, in the first place, knows the laws? The judges, Socrates, who are present in this court. What do you mean to say, Miletus, that they are able to instruct and improve the youth? Certainly they are. What, all of them? Or just some and not others? There are 501 judges right here. All of them, all 501. By the goddess Hera, that is good news. There are plenty of improvers for the youth then. And what do you say of the audience, the people watching? Do they improve the youth? Yes, they do. And the senators? Yes, the senators improve the youth. But perhaps the members of the assembly corrupt them, Congress. Or do they improve them too? They improve the youth. Then every Athenian improves and elevates youth, all with the exception of myself. And I alone am their corrupter. Is that what you affirm? That is what I stoutly affirm. I am very unfortunate if you are right. But suppose I ask you a question. How about horses? When you think about a horse, does one person do them harm and everybody else in the world improves the horse? Or isn't that exactly the opposite of the truth? One person, specifically the horse trainer, is able to improve a horse, and everybody else who don't know what they're doing around horses, they would be the ones that damage the horse because they don't know what they're doing. Is that not true of horses or of any animal or of any other subject? If you don't know what you're doing, how can you improve it? Happy indeed would be the condition of the youth in Athens if they had but one corrupter only, and all the rest of the world were their improvers. But you, Miletus, have sufficiently shown that you have never thought about the youth. You are careless. Your carelessness is seen in your not caring about the very things which you bring against me. And now, Miletus, I will ask you another question. By Zeus, I will. Which is better, to live among bad citizens or among good citizens? Answer, friend. This question is one that may be easily answered. Do not the good do good to their neighbors, and bad neighbors do bad to their neighbors? Certainly. And is there anyone who would rather be injured than benefited by the people who they live with and live around them in their town? Answer me, my good friend. The law requires you to answer. Does anyone like to be injured by the people around them? Certainly not. So when you accuse me of corrupting and deteriorating the youth who are my fellow citizens that live around me, do you allege that I corrupt them intentionally or unintentionally? Intentionally, I say. But you have just admitted that the good do their neighbors good, and the evil do their neighbors evil. Now, is that a truth which your superior wisdom has recognized in your youth in life? And I am at my age, which is about 70, in such darkness and ignorance that I do not know that if a man with whom I have to live is corrupted by me, then I am very likely to be harmed by them. And yet, I still corrupt them. I make them bad, and their badness can come back and hurt me. Does that make sense? Do you think that's what I'm doing? So, no one is likely to be convinced by this argument. Either I do not corrupt them, or I corrupt them unintentionally. And on either view of the case, you are lying in your indictment against me. If my case and my offense is unintentional, then the law has no cognizance of my unintentional offenses in this regard. You ought to have taken me aside privately and warned and admonished me, for if I had been better advised that I was corrupting the people around me and they were hurting me, I should have left off doing what I was doing, only unintentionally. No doubt I should have done that. But you would have nothing to say to me and refused to teach me, and now you bring me up in this court, which is a place not of instruction, but a place of punishment. It will be very clear to you, Athenians, as I was saying, that Miletus has no care at all, great or small, about this matter. But still I should like to know, Miletus, in what I am affirmed to corrupt the young. How do I corrupt them? I suppose you mean, as I infer from your indictment, that I teach them not to acknowledge the gods, which the state acknowledges, but some other new divinities or some spiritual agencies instead. These are the lessons by which I corrupt the youth, as you say? Yes, that I say emphatically. Then by the gods, Miletus, of whom are you speaking? Tell me in the court, in somewhat plainer terms, what you mean. For I do not understand, as of yet, whether you affirm that I teach other men to acknowledge some gods, and therefore that I do believe in gods, and I am not entirely an atheist. This you do not lay to my charge, but only you say that there are not the same gods by which the city recognizes. The charge is that there are different gods that I worship. Or do you mean that I am an atheist, simply, and a teacher of atheism? I mean the latter, that you are a complete atheist. What an extraordinary statement. Why do you think that I'm an atheist? Do you mean that I do not believe in the Godhead or the sun or moon like other men? I assure you, judges, he does not, for he says that the sun is a stone and the moon earth. Friend Miletus, you think that you're accusing Anaxagoras, who is a natural philosopher. You have a bad opinion of the judges if you think that they're illiterate to such a degree as to not have known the writings of Anaxagoras, and this is the kind of stuff that he writes about in his book. And so, the youth are said to be taught Anaxagoras' stuff from his books by Socrates. How can Socrates teach what's already in a book that Anaxagoras wrote a generation ago? There are not infrequent exhibitions of these ideas in the theater. and they might pay money and laugh at Socrates in the play against me if he pretends to father these extraordinary views. And so, Miletus, you really think that I do not believe in any god? I swear by Zeus that you believe in absolutely none at all. Nobody will believe you, Miletus, and I am pretty sure that you do not believe yourself. I cannot help thinking, men of Athens, that Miletus is reckless and impudent, and that he has written this indictment in a spirit of mere wantonness and youthful bravado. Has he not compounded a riddle, thinking to try me? He said to himself, I shall see whether Socrates the wise will discover my facetious contradiction, or whether I shall be able to deceive him and the rest of them. For he certainly does appear to me to contradict himself in the indictment against me, as much as if he said that Socrates is guilty of not believing in the gods and yet of believing in them. But this is not like a person who is honest. I should like you, O citizens of Athens, to join me in examining what I conceive to be his inconsistency. And do you, Miletus, answer? And I must remind the audience of my request that they not make a disturbance if I speak in my accustomed manner. Did ever a man, Miletus, believe in the existence of human things, and not of human beings? I wish, men of Athens, that he would answer, not be always trying to get up an interruption. Did ever a man believe in horsemanship and not horses? Or in flute playing and not flute players? No, my friend, I will answer to you and the court, as Miletus refuses to answer. There is no person who ever believed this. But now, please answer the next question. Can a person believe in spiritual and divine agencies and not in spirits or divine things? He cannot. Oh, how lucky! I have extracted that answer by the assistance of the court. But then you swear in the indictment that I teach and believe in divine or spiritual agencies, new or old, no matter for that, at any rate, that I believe in spiritual agencies, so you say, and swear in the affidavit. And yet, if I believe in divine beings, how can I help believing in spirits or demigods? Must I not? To be sure, I must, and therefore I may assume that your silence gives consent. Now, what are spirits or demigods? Are they not either gods or the sons of gods? Certainly they are. But this is what I call the facetious riddle invented by you. The demigods or spirits are gods, and you say first that I do not believe in gods, and then again that I do believe in gods. And that is if I believe in demigods. For if the demigods are the illegitimate sons and daughters of the gods, whether by the nymph or by any other mothers of whom they are said to be the sons and daughters, what human being will ever believe that there are no gods if there are sons of gods? You might as well affirm in the existence of mules and deny that of horses and donkeys. Such nonsense, Miletus, could only have been intended by you to make trial of me. You have put this in the indictment because you had nothing real of which to accuse me. But no one who has a particle of understanding will ever be convinced by you that the same person can believe in divine and superhuman things, spiritual things, and yet not believe that there are gods or demigods and heroes. Well, I have said enough in answer to the charges of Miletus. Any other elaborate defense is unnecessary. But I know only too well how many are the enemies which I have incurred, and this is what will be my destruction, if I am destroyed. Not Miletus or Anytus, but the envy and detraction of the world, which has been the death of many good people, and will probably be the death of many more. There is no danger of my being the last of them. I just have a note in the margin to myself that reminds me of the story of Jesus as well. Envy and detraction of the world that put to death good men. I will not be the last of them. Someone will say, are you not ashamed, Socrates, of a course of life which is likely to bring you to an untimely end? To that person I may fairly answer, there you are mistaken. A person who is good for anything ought not to calculate the chance of living or dying. That person ought only to consider whether in doing anything they are doing right or wrong, acting the part of a good person or a bad person. Whereas upon your view, the heroes who fell at Troy were not good for much. Achilles above all, who altogether despised danger in comparison with disgrace. When he was so eager to slay Hector, he goes on to referencing the Iliad. He's making the point that everyone likes Achilles, but he didn't care about dying. He wanted to go ahead and avenge his friend's death, and even though he was going to die later. So he was doing the right thing. Achilles was doing the right thing, even though he was going to die. Strange indeed would be my conduct, O citizens of Athens, if I, who, when I was ordered by the generals whom you chose to command me at Potidaia, which is a city up in Greece, and he was positioned there during the Peloponnesian War, and his other posts at these other two cities, and I remained there where the generals told me, like any other soldier facing death. If now, right here in this law court, when I was as convinced and imagined that God is my general now, and he orders me to fulfill the philosopher's mission of searching into myself and of other men. So there's the analogy. I was a soldier and I did what my generals told me to do, and now I'm a philosopher and I'm doing what God is telling me to do. If I were to desert my post through fear of death or any other fear, that would indeed be strange, and I might be justly arraigned in court for denying the existence of gods, if I disobeyed the oracle at Delphi, Apollo, because I was afraid of death, fancying that I was wise when I was not wise. For the fear of death is indeed the ultimate pretense of wisdom, and not real wisdom, being a pretense of knowing the unknown. No one knows whether death, which people fear, no one knows whether it might actually be the greatest evil or it might be actually the greatest good. It is not this ignorance of a disgraceful sort, the ignorance which is the conceit that a man knows or a person knows what he does not know. And in this respect, only I believe myself to differ from people in general, and may perhaps claim to be wiser than they are. That whereas I know but little of the world below, I do not suppose that I know. There it is. He doesn't know, and he doesn't pretend to know, and he doesn't think that he knows. But I do know that injustice and disobedience to a better, whether a god or a general, is evil and dishonorable, and I will never fear or avoid a possible good rather than a certain evil. And therefore, if you let me go now, and are convinced by Anytus, who said that since I had been prosecuted, I must be put to death, and that if I escape now, your sons will be utterly ruined by listening to my words. If you say to me, Socrates, this time we will not mind Anytus, and you shall be let off and acquitted, but upon one condition, that you are not to inquire and speculate in this way anymore, and that if you are caught doing so again, you shall be drugged back into this law court, and you shall die. If this was the condition on which you let me go, I should reply, O citizens of Athens, I honor and I love you, but I shall obey God rather than you. And while I have life and strength, I shall never cease from the practice of teaching philosophy, exhorting anyone whom I meet and saying to them after my manner, you, my friend, a citizen of the great and mighty and wise city of Athens, are you not ashamed of heaping up the greatest amount of money and honor and reputation and caring so little about wisdom and truth and the greatest improvement of the soul, which you never regard or heed at all? So that's one thing that really gets me about, modern Western life. What do we think is the greatest good? Money, power, buying things. Um, we've really lost valuing wisdom and truth and improving our souls, which is like the animating principle behind the person, the being itself inside the person. And if the person with whom I am arguing says, yes, but I do care, then I do not leave him or let him alone, but I proceed to ask them questions and examine and cross-examine them. And if I think that that person has no virtue, but only says that he has, I reproach him with undervaluing the greater and overvaluing the less. And I shall repeat the same words to everyone whom I meet, young and old, citizen and non-citizen, but especially to citizens, inasmuch as they are my brethren. For I know that this is the command of God, and I believe that no greater good has ever happened to this state than my service to the God. For I do nothing but go around persuading you all, old and young alike, to take thought for your persons, not for your persons or your properties or your greed or your money, but first and chiefly to care about the greatest improvement of your soul, your being. I tell you that virtue is not given by money, but from virtue comes money and every other good of humans, public as well as private. This is my teaching, and if this is the doctrine which corrupts the youth, then I am a mischievous person. But if anyone says that this is not my teaching, they are speaking an untruth. Wherefore, O citizens of Athens, I say to you, do as Anytus bids, or not as Anytus bids, and either acquit me or convict me. But whichever you do, understand that I shall never alter my ways, not even if I have to die many times. Citizens of Athens, do not interrupt me. There was an understanding between us at the beginning that you should hear me and not interrupt me to the end. I have something more to say at which you may be inclined to cry out and yell. But I believe that to hear me will be good for you, and therefore I beg that you will not cry out. I would have you know that if you kill such a person as me, you will injure yourselves more than you are injuring me. Nothing will injure me, not Miletus, nor yet Anytus. They cannot. For a bad person is not permitted to injure a better person. I do not deny that Anytus may, perhaps, kill or drive me into exile or deprive a person of their civil rights by convicting them wrongfully in court. He may imagine, and others may imagine, that he is inflicting a great injury, but there I do not agree. For the evil of doing something evil is greater. For the evil of doing as he is doing, the evil of unjustly taking away the life of another is greater far. And now, Athenians, I am not going to argue for my own sake, as you may think, but I'm going to argue for your sake, that you may not sin against the God by condemning me. I am his gift to you. For if you kill me, you will not easily find a successor to me. If I may use such a ludicrous figure of speech, I am sort of a gadfly, given to the state by God, and the state is a great and noble steed who is tardy in his motions owing to his very size and requires to be stung and stirred into life. I am that gadfly which God has attached to the state, and all day long and in all places am always fastening upon you, arousing and persuading and reproaching you. You will not easily find another like me. Therefore I would advise you to spare me. I dare say that you may feel out of temper, like a person who is suddenly awakened from a sleep. You're grumpy while I do my work as a gadfly. and you think that you might easily strike me dead, as Anytus advises, and then you would sleep for the remainder of your lives without being stung. Unless God, in his care of you, sends another gadfly. When I say that I am given to you by God, the proof of my mission is this. If I had been like other men, I should not have neglected my own concerns in my own life, or patiently seen the neglect of them during all these years, and have been doing your work, coming to you individually like a father or a teacher or an elder brother, exhorting you to regard virtue. Such conduct, I say, would be unlike human nature. If I had gained anything, or if my exhortations had been paid, there would have been some sense in my doing so. If I got money for doing this, it would have made sense. But now, as you will see, not even the impudence of my accusers dares to say that I have ever been paid for what I do. And I have a witness to this, my poverty. I am poor. Someone may wonder why I go about in private giving advice and busying myself with the concerns of others, but do not venture to come forward in public and advise the state. I will tell you why. You have heard me speak at sundry times and in diverse places of an oracle or a sign which comes to me, and is the divinity which Miletus ridicules in the indictment. So here Socrates is admitting that he does have a divinity that advises him that's not a state god. So here he's trying to convince the judges, the 501 citizens, that the law is unjust and it's okay for people to have internal divinities that are speaking to them. So this is the divinity which Miletus ridicules in the indictment, the second charge. This sign, which is a kind of a voice that comes to me, first began when I was a child. It always forbids me to do things, but never commands me to do anything which I am going to do. This is what deters me from being a politician, and rightly, as I think. For I am certain, O citizens of Athens, that if I had engaged in politics, I should have perished long ago. And he goes along and he has a couple examples of how there was a couple times when he had some public positions, they were trying to get him to do evil things. There's two examples, which we're going to skip in the interest of skipping some time. But his examples are times when he chose to do the right thing and not the wrong thing, and he could have been put to death. He could have been captured and tried for treason because he didn't do the wrong thing. But I shall be asked, why do people delight in continually conversing with you? I have told you already, Athenians, the whole truth about this matter. They like to hear the cross-examination of the pretenders to wisdom. There is amusement in it. It's fun. But now this duty of cross-examining other citizens has been imposed upon me by God, and has been signified to me by oracles, visions, and in every way in which the will of divine power has ever been told to anyone. So he is a philosopher to the core, and he is sure of it, and he is sure this is his mission on earth by God. This is true, O Athenians, or if not true, would soon be refuted. If I am or have ever been corrupting the youth, those of them who are now grown up and have become sensible that I gave them bad advice when they were young, they should now come forward as accusers and take their revenge. Or if they do not like to come themselves, then their relatives, their fathers, brothers, or other kinsmen, should say what evil their families have suffered at my hands all over these years. Now is their time. Many of them I see in this court. There's Crito, there's Critobulus. He mentions some other people, and then he mentions Adiamantus, the son of Ariston, whose brother Plato is also present. So Plato is writing himself into the audience. I might mention a great many others, some of whom Miletus should have produced as witnesses in the course of his speech, and let him still produce them, if he has forgotten. I will make way for him, and let him say, if he has any testimony of the sort which he can produce, nay, Athenians, it's the very opposite of the truth. All these people are here in court to witness on my behalf, on behalf of their supposed corrupter or their supposed injurer, as Miletus and Anytus calls me. Not the corrupted youth only, there might have been a motive for that, but their uncorrupted elder relatives. Why should they too support me with their testimony? Why indeed, except for the sake of truth and justice, and because they know that I am speaking the truth and that Miletus is a liar. Well, Athenians, this and the like of this is my defense, which I have to offer. Yet one word more. Perhaps there may be someone who is offended at me when he calls to mind how he himself on a similar or even less serious occasion has prayed and whined and entreated the judges with many tears and like a sob story about how he has many children and he brought his children in court and he can't be convicted and put to death because here are my kids and I'm such a good person and blah, 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 blah. So I'll spare you the details, but he's basically saying that a lot of people at this time in court would make a sob story and say, oh, woe is me, you know, I have kids, don't convict me, don't put me to death. And he says, but one who has reached my years and who has a name for wisdom ought not to demean himself, whether this opinion of me is deserved or not. At any rate, the world has decided that Socrates is in some way superior to other men. And if those among you who are said to be superior in wisdom and courage and any other virtue demean themselves in this way in court, how shameful is their conduct. I have seen many men of supposed reputation, when they have been in court, behaving in the strangest manner. They seem to fancy that they were going to suffer some dreadful thing if they died, and that they could be immortal if only you would allow them to live in court. I think that such are a dishonor to the state, especially this state of Athens, and that any stranger that would come and hear them would say that the most eminent of citizens that you think in Athens, to whom the Athenians themselves give great honor and command, are no better than cowards when they do this kind of stuff in court. And I say that these things ought not to be done by those of us who have a reputation. And if they are done, you ought not to permit them. You ought rather to show that you are far more disposed to condemn the man who gets up a doleful scene and makes the city ridiculous than them who holds his peace. But setting aside the question of public opinion, there seems to be something wrong in asking a favor of a judge and thus procuring an acquittal. Oh, I guess they're closing. Closing?